Hey, so I have an exercise for you which was inspired by the useless box. This is an example on YouTube on Jeffrey's channel. The useless box with surprises. I'll link you to this just for fun. I'll play a quick example. You can see you turn it on here and it'll turn itself off. So it'll open and it'll turn itself off. And it'll move around and stuff like that. Now there are quite a few silly examples on YouTube on this. Now what we want to create for this exercise is a useless entity, so a useless object on the heap, which will delete itself. A basic example of this in the main function, I have this useless entity, which is a class. Alright, so I do a pointer to that, a pointer to a useless entity, and then I use the new operator to allocate a new useless entity on the heap. And of course you can do some initialization if you want to do that. Now it's important that we don't try and use that pointer following the statement because when we allocate the useless entity on the heap, it'll display something and then it'll deallocate itself again. Okay, so that is the exercise. I'll build around this to show an example output. We can see here, useless entity, destruct invoked. The member was 55. And then we get end of program. We can display something else, something silly here. But basically we get the destructor called, so we allocate it and then it's destroyed again. Following the statement, we do not want to use that pointer again. You probably want to set that to null pointer. For this exercise, go and define the useless entity class. The useless entity is allocated on the heap, and then following allocation, the useless entity will delete itself. In the constructor and destructor, you can do an appropriate console output statement. And then of course you want to test it and make sure it works properly. Alright, so pause the video, attempt this exercise, and when I come back I'll show you my implementation. Okay, back in Visual Studio, let's look at my implementations. I have the class useless entity. In the public section, I have the constructor and the destructor. And in the constructor, I have this formal parameter with a default argument. Again, this you can do it in whatever way you want. Then I have an appropriate console output statement. So I do console output useless entity constructor invoked. I assign the member parameter to the member, which is just an integer in this example. And then I have the delete this statement right here. Okay, so this exercise really tests your understanding of the delete operator and the this pointer. It is going to delete this. This again refers to the current instance or the current object. So it's going to destroy itself. And then of course we also have the destructor with an appropriate console output statement. Useless entity destruct invoked or something like that. And I also print out the member was, and then I do member. Then in main I have a pointer to a useless entity, which I just call ptr for pointer, and then use the new operator to allocate a useless entity on the heap. And I pass in 55 for the constructor. Then I assign null pointer to that pointer, because it's going to get deallocated to that heap object. Basically during construction it's going to deallocate itself again. And if I build around that, you can say useless entity construct invoked, and then useless entity destruct invoked again. And then we get end of program. And if you think back to the typical implementation of the shared pointer, it has a control block on the heap, and that will basically deallocate itself as well. That is when the reference count reaches 0. I'm not going to look at the implementation for the shared pointer to show you that, because that's kind of a worms that you open up. But that control block does a statement like this, is going to delete this. Alright. Now one thing I want to mention before we end this off, and something that you may have tried, is to instantiate the useless entity on the stack. If you do a statement like this and you try and build around it, you'll get an error or a crash. Okay, so you don't want to do it in this way. You only want to use new and delete with heap objects, not with stack objects. Okay, that is it for this exercise. I just wanted to do something different, something silly. Maybe to refresh your memory on the delete operator and then also on the this pointer. So I hope you found this interesting, and I'll see you next time.